So I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of physiotherapy and therapy as a whole, and how we can help, and some of the research and some of the trials that are going on at the moment. Just a little bit of an update again from Richard's talk, so hopefully you're all listening. But just a reminder, in terms of Spinocerebellar Ataxia, it's an autosomal dominant cerebellar ataxia, inherited condition, and it's progressive ataxia, so the main symptom being that of ataxia, affecting the cerebellum. So as we all know, that yellow part, mine's also yellow, of the cerebellum, receiving information to help regulate movement. It coordinates voluntary movement, making it very smooth and balanced, and it plays a big part in our posture, in our balance, in our speech. It plays a crucial role, as Richard was also saying, in motor learning and motor adaptation. So that's why kind of training of the cerebellum is really vital. Don't get this right. So as we've already kind of touched on before, the different types of spinocerebellar ataxia, I've got from 1 to 36, as Richard was saying, up to 40. And this, the differences in the ataxia, the subtypes, can present with very different characteristics and distinguishing features. So regarding the symptoms you might experience, whether that be from maybe visual symptoms, sensory symptoms, motor symptoms, tremor, stiffness, coordination problems. So again, it's very important that you have a therapist, as we've been talking about, who understands the condition and knows the different types of symptoms that you might be experiencing. So these tables are just looking at some of those maybe differences in conditions and some of the classification systems used in spinocerebellar ataxia. So these are just maybe a list of some of the most common symptoms that are presented with. Again, big variety of symptoms, and again, it's not an exhaustive list, but often some of the things that our clients will be talking to us about. You might experience some of the symptoms, you might not experience some of them as well. And I think the most important thing is that these symptoms can really intertwine and they can really affect each other. So, for example, if you have problems with your balance, this might make you more risk of falls. This might then reduce your kind of general activity levels and then also reduce your cardiovascular fitness and then have effects on things like fatigue and pain. So all intertwined, and that's what we want to look at, everything as a whole, and that's what I think as therapists as well we try and aim to do all the time. So, how can therapy help? So as we know, there's some exciting things medically going on and hopefully coming very soon within SCAR itself. But as you know, there's no kind of radical treatment yet. So the evidence into therapy is really important, and there is evidence out there through randomized controlled trials and through systematic reviews. And they've given us kind of best practice guidelines as well, which they've got references at the end to all these articles and guidelines, so you can have a look at them yourselves as well. So within these guidelines, I've just tried to pick some of the main kind of pointers, and then we'll look into the main bits of the research as well. So all the guidelines say that it's really important to have that neurological specialism within your therapy team, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists. So having that multidisciplinary team input is really important, and accessing that as quickly as possible within diagnosis is really recommended. But also they recommend that ongoing service and that kind of access to long-term care options, which we know can be tricky in our kind of healthcare environment, and I think all over the world. The main focus in regards to SCAR is maintaining that stability and current motor function so it doesn't affect your day-to-day functional activities of daily living, and promoting that for as long as possible, preventing and slowing down progression of the disease. But I also thought the main important thing was we're here for advice, we're here for education, we're here for support as well, alongside all the other members of the team here, the field workers and everyone, please do use us. So me and Julie are physiotherapists, so we're going to go into a bit more into detail into physiotherapy and look at specifically what we do. So as physiotherapists, there are kind of two different types of approaches, the restorative and the compensatory approach. So the restorative approach looking at improving function by working on maybe specific impairments. Despite changes in the cerebellum, improvement can occur with that repetition, with that practice, with that challenge. And also the compensatory approach. So this might be looking at devices that might help support you, things like orthotics, movement retraining, optimising the environment and providing those practical day-to-day strategies. So we often use a bit of a mixture of these approaches within our support for SCAR patients. But then I thought main things that we probably look at are some of these symptoms or impairments. So things like physiotherapy can have a significant impact on balance, walking, and that can have a big impact on your activity and what you're able to do day to day. Walking not only helping to preserve mobility, but also give advice and education maybe on walking aids or wheelchairs. Things like posture and your coordination, but also things like muscle length. So, the importance of being able to keep and maintain muscle length to help with function, day-to-day tasks, preventing spasm, stiffness, and preventing contracture. So all these things together, we're looking at reducing activity limitation, as I said, increasing participation in activities, whether that be, your day-to-day things, being able to hoover, being able to get washed and dressed, maybe it links with work, maybe it links with your specific sports and hobbies as well. So trying to make things as energy efficient as possible and as easy as possible. So a little bit more scientific, going into some physiotherapy approaches. So there's a systematic review done in 2014 that looks at kind of motor training as a whole and breaking that down into different approaches that we might use. As I said, motor learning is possible within changes in the cerebellum, and there's lots of optimistic research about that and the effect of rehabilitation. So looking at these different approaches, you've got things like dynamic task practice. So this is kind of challenging and exploring those stability limits through functional tasks. Also to help reduce upper body weight bearing to help maintain posture and balance. Got things like gait and balance retraining, so specific exercises focused on static and dynamic balance and coordination, and we'll look at that a little bit more in detail. And also specific strength and flexibility training, so that might be some specific stretches, some specific strengthening exercises. And within that systematic review, all these approaches had positive effects, and it was common that actually there was a mixture of all the different approaches that therapists would use. One thing that did come out, they were able to then look at these approaches and then 12 months down the line. And those that had those individual programs that were doing bits at home, they were shown to be able to help retain that therapy effect and that training effect. And a lot of this is through maintenance of the SARA score. So this is a clinical assessment of ataxia that a few of you might have done by either neurologists or by us ourselves, looking at specific parts of the ataxia symptoms. So maintenance of these therapy approaches is dependent on continuous training, and we'll look at this a little bit more as well as we go, but just to say homework is essential. So, in terms of the research into physiotherapy, a lot of it lies within kind of different modalities and adjuncts used. Research within SCAR itself can be limited because of the variability of the condition, but also because of the population numbers, and it will probably be a bit of a theme of today. There's not enough research, not enough people doing the research, or not enough participants within these trials to show if things truly make an effect or not. Also, as we've talked about, the kind of clinical expertise within cerebellar ataxia across New Zealand, that's what we're trying to hope to achieve, to build that experience across New Zealand. Also, some of the research that I might be talking about looks at ataxia as a little bit of a whole. So some of the research might have come out of different conditions who also might suffer from ataxic symptoms, so things like MS or brain injury. So we'll have a look into some of these things for you. So there's a lot of research now in terms of technology and using that within rehab, and using things like game-based training that can help balance and coordination, and even things like exergames, which include kind of that whole body training using kind of even virtual reality. So there's a few studies that have been shown on this. The first study here in 2018 that we'll look at is a 4-week block of training where they use the Xbox Kinect, something again that's quite commercially available, and they did 40 minutes of this 3 times a week, comparing it to just normal therapy. So that was maybe some balance and coordination exercises. So what they were looking at, they looked at the SARA ataxia score, they looked at some specific gait analysis, and they also looked at that 9-hole peg test, so looking at fine control, hand coordination. So they found significant differences in the SARA rating scale, particularly in relation to walking and that upper body coordination. But there was no significant differences between doing game-based therapy compared to normal therapy. So it kind of just shows anything is good, anything is better than nothing. But if you're going to find things like games, technology, if that's what you're into, if that's what you're going to be able to sustain, if you can see your changes on those games, be able to track things, it's more motivating and stimulating, then fantastic, it does have that effect.
Just to clarify, they're not the game you sit on the couch and make the family. Just clarifying there.
But these next two studies, so again, in the first one in 2013, these EXA games, and they found specific changes within dynamic balance and helped with that anticipatory coordination reactions. And again, that was using the Xbox Connect. It was for an hour a day for 6 weeks at home, so they found the bigger the intensity of training, the bigger the effect it made also. But also this last one in 2013, again, was using the Nintendo Wii that some of you might even have in the boxes at home, stashed away. It improved ataxic symptoms, even within more advanced ataxia. So these were all people who were mainly wheelchair bound, were able to use this type of technology to be able to make a difference within their symptoms. So again, bigger studies needed and more participants. So a lot of these studies only have about 9 or 10 participants at a time, so we just need more numbers to do that. Next thing that's also been looked into is things like treadmill training. So treadmill training with body weight support to aid that repetitive practice of walking, improving cardiovascular fitness, but also being able to challenge your walking and challenge your balance without having any risk of falling. So this study in 2018, they had 25 participants, all with SCAR, and 30% of their body weight was supported through a system a bit like that in the picture. So people were able to get up to a bit of a maximum velocity. They were also able, in the last part of their training, even to add in some balance exercises on the treadmill, things like throwing a ball, all those things that might not be possible without a little bit of body weight support. They looked again at the SARA rating scale, also another balance measure, the Berg balance scale, and cardiovascular fitness. And there was shown significant differences between cardiovascular fitness in particular and the static balance scales. So again, not specific changes within the ataxia rating scale. It was only a 10-week study, so it was 2 lots of 50-minute sessions a week. So whether the intensity needed to be more, whether they needed to look at it for a longer period of time to see those effects on the ataxia specifically. Also, they did have a control group to compare it against, someone that wasn't doing any treadmill training. So again, we need those bigger studies that are looking at different types of therapy and comparing them as well. There's also been some other studies here in regards to treadmill training used with ataxia after brain injury, again showing some significant kind of functional improvement. Again, more research needed in that kind of progressive condition and how it might help. Whether this is something that could be sustained, whether we have the kind of equipment, and whether you can access that might be a little bit more tricky. Things like weighting. So one strategy advised to use for help with walking was to use weights around the kind of ankle or around the trunk itself, around your chest. A bit more of a compensatory approach, and there's little evidence into the kind of efficacy of this approach. And actually they were found that actually reducing the weight could actually sometimes help with walking balance, and they were able to access better movement patterns without the weight. This chap these researchers in 2003, they looked at using trunk weights, so weights around the core for gait. And they actually found that the gait patterns changed quite unpredictably. They couldn't tell who would benefit from it or not, often actually worsening their gait patterns and improving it. So they didn't really support the use, but again, that might be something that can be assessed on an individual basis. Also in 2003, they looked at the weighted vest for someone with more advanced ataxia, looking at specifically if they could improve kind of a reach task, so using your upper body. And this was, it was only a case study. They did show much improved effects, but whether that was due to the weighted vest or whether it was due to them being in a better sitting posture, a better postural control, hard to know. So less theoretical evidence regarding this. And we know that with SCAR, With the effects on our cerebellum, it does affect our upper body coordination as well. It's not all about walking and that kind of thing. So it can also affect with things like writing, use of cutlery, doing up buttons. And we can also present with tremor as well. So postural tremor being that when you're just static or holding a position, for example, when you're holding out your arm, or a kinetic tremor, which might be linked more when you're reaching for something, doing a task in particular. So again, there's been some look into use of weights here, things like weights around the wrist this time, or even weighted cutlery, focusing on that specific functional task like eating or writing. And again, some people found it very useful, some people found actually an increase in tremor after the weights were removed, and some people found it just too fatiguing using the weights. But again, this can be assessed individually, things to be explored. Other devices such as anti-tremor cups or non-slip mats, things that help kind of postural control to then be able to improve efficiency of movement patterns. There's also been some studies into cooling therapy, a little bit more within the MS population, but this has been using cooling prior to doing something kind of very fine motor, so by, for example, being able to then sign a document. But the research within this deep cooling has been found to be most efficient, but within the research there's been from 1 minute to 15 minutes of cooling, so again quite varied on what actually will work. Again, just lots of different options and things you can explore and see what works for you. Exercise. One of our main things is promoting a kind of general exercise. So important in ataxia, not just for your health-related reasons, but also to help specific symptoms. It should be really enjoyable. It should be sustained. Trying to look at different options, finding something that's going to work for you is so important. We're not saying just go to the gym. If that's not your thing, you're not going to do it. You're not going to keep doing it. So things like swimming and hydrotherapy have been shown to help with health-related quality of life. People are able to access movement they can't maybe when they're up on the land. And also it can be really beneficial for things like your lung volumes and your speech as well. Exercise into flexibility and strength, which has a research focus on kind of yoga and Pilates. But also there's been some evidence into things like horse riding and climbing also giving similar effects. So such a wide variety of things and trying to give things a go. In early stages of ataxia, so those things that kind of high demanding for your coordination, things like badminton, squash, table tennis, those kind of things can be really effective as well. In regards to cardiovascular fitness, the guidelines are all in relation to the general guidelines, that 150 minutes a week of exercise, but breaking that down into 10 minutes at a time is fine. Finding those 10 minutes each day, finding those things that is not also going to impact lots of fatigue that you can relate to. So there's been some studies on like cycling in terms of aerobic exercise, that kind of reciprocal movement that can aid that reciprocal activation of our muscles, helping them with coordination. And they found some research in that even 15 minutes of cycling can give that effect. And then balance and walking aids is something we can help and advise on and look at. There aren't any particular research studies looking at the role of these, but we know that they should be considered on an individual basis also. So lots of the research and studies look at that kind of light touch postural control. So sensory cues through the fingertips can give quite a lot of information, and through observation and experience we find people with ataxia might not get on with a normal standard kind of walking aid like a frame or a walking stick, and they may actually find that more difficult to place or more difficult to negotiate with a tremor or with coordination problems. So some people prefer like things like Nordic poles, or then looking at those other different options as well, exploring them. Also trying to reduce the demand on the upper body and the weight bearing aspect is important and helps support you through your balance and postural systems. Wheelchairs, again, not just appropriate, but looking at how we can make them the best for you as well. Postural support is so important for you to be able to access movement, but also to conserve energy, to help with your breathing, to help with your swallow, all those things that our posture does for us. So having that ongoing assessment and individual assessment is so important as well. And knowing the people that we can also chat to about that and be able to kind of refer to the best places. So just a little summary. Research into rehabilitation will always remain a bit of a challenge. We always need more participants, we always need more studies, and also looking at the comparison between things. So again, majority of the research is looking at including an array of strategies, looking at balance, coordination, core strength, stretching, stability, and that should be guided by therapists, but also the importance of that ongoing training and you guys being able to do things at home or in your own time that are going to give you the best results. So we know physio is good, we know exercise is good, but what kind of doses, what intensity do we need to be doing that to give the best effects? So there has been some research into this. A lot of the research shows the higher intensity of the rehab, the greater the clinical outcome, and the greater the maintenance of these outcomes also. So we have a few studies here. In 2010, he looked at a 4-week burst of therapy. It was quite intense, so it was 2 hours Monday to Friday and an hour each day of the weekend, really focused on balance, walking and muscle strengthening exercises. So there were significant differences in the SARA rating scale, in walking speed, and these effects were actually maintained 12 weeks on as well. And then the other chap he also did in 2009 and 2010, 2 different studies, but again looking at that 4-week intensive program. One was an hour a day and one was kind of 3 sessions of an hour a week, so 3 times a week compared to an hour a day. So they, again, within this, they found significant improvements with your walking speed, lateral sway and standing, and also that coordination of your upper body. These were sustained at 8 weeks, but after that, without continuous training, those that were doing exercise routines at home were able to sustain the results past the 8 weeks, but those that weren't, the results weren't sustained. So again, that higher intensity, most training is effective, and it's been shown even with more advanced ataxia. But remembering that there is that time restriction, and we need to have that continuous training input to be able to maintain those kind of physical effects for you. And again, we need more studies into kind of the long-term effects, longitudinal studies, and looking exactly on what dose might be best for you as well. This was just very interesting on dosage as well. So in 2011, they were looking at the SARA rating scale, and it was shown within Spinocerebellar Ataxia that it can change between 0.4 to 2.2 points a year. And these 2 studies that I mentioned before with the 4-week intensive training, they actually changed the SARA scores by up to 5.2 points. So that's like gaining 2 or more years of disease progression. If we could get that, and if we could maintain that through doing the right things at home, through the right exercise, how amazing would that be? So we need more studies into this, but it has been shown there. And then last bit, again, just wanting to look at what's going on around the world, these clinical trials and things related a little bit more to therapy. We've already spoken a little bit about this kind of transmagnetic stimulation and some great effects that they were having there. So I won't speak about that one again. But also there's been looked into different therapy adjuncts, things like Tai Chi, whole body vibration training. There's even a study going on at the moment about this kind of wearable stabilizer that gives mechanical vibration. Lots of different things out there that are all very exciting and interesting, and that we're awaiting the results on. Another study as well looking at different parts of the training and seeing whether aerobic training is better than balance training. So comparing 30 minutes of cycling to just a balance program. So we will see. And again, they're all on that clinicaltrials.gov website. It's got not just the kind of medical trials, but also some of the therapy trials there. And then just a last point, I think, was as well in terms of that team management consideration. So being supported by a range of therapists, everyone here, getting the management they need for specific things they might need, but it will be very individual to you, and the importance of that. And I think that's it from us. Thank you.
I know we've gone over time, but I just need to say that it's okay. Okay, good. You're all going to be excited to know that there are clinicians that take all of that into account. And I think that's really wonderful that you know that every time, and this is why we're introducing you to us today, so that you know when you come to the clinic, we've already given you the history. We're not going to need to tell you that you have to do this 4 weeks in a row for 3 hours. You're going to come dedicated and ready to do it. And then we'll be able to spend the time assessing you as an individual. But ideally, the crew over here would really like you to wait until the clinic is up and running to access here, because we'd like you to all be coming through Miriam to get to us. So you can register with the Duncan Foundation soon, but you might hear me say, could you possibly wait a bit? Not very long, but I just thought it's important that you don't try and get us early and access us without going this way, because it's a really important, it's a team approach, and I think you'll get a lot of benefit from seeing us as a team in the clinic first, because we'll be able to go next door and go, Richard, what can we do about this? And get a little bit of dress as a team. Just sort of put that little word in.
Any questions?
Just checking, can we get you guys slides?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Just one, going back a couple of slides, you're saying that you research specifically on paleo about not doing particular exercise, or is that coming into the
Yeah, so polio, we've actually designed a specific, so polio is different in that it's a patchy presentation of weakness.
Yeah.
And some muscles were originally paralysed and then they regained some strength, but that was through collateral sprouting of the nerve. And as we age, our motor units are dropping off, and if you put too much stress into a particular muscle, it might only have a fatigability or a weakness, and you push it too hard, you can cause that muscle to actually atrophy or weaken further, and that's really dangerous.
So that wasn't coming across to the NCA?
No, but I was just saying how exercise prescription needs to be very specific to the neuromuscular condition. And that's a perfect example of why it's dangerous to just throw exercises and you think, oh, we'll just try this one. You need to know and understand all the research there to think why you're pulling the tools you are and how you're prescribing them. Intensity for scarers go for gold in lots of ways, but specific type of exercises, polio is like, do that one but don't do much of that, do that. It's very different.
Okay. Thank you very much.